Hey guys, some long name here. In rhythm games, it's pretty common for people to be treated differently based on their skill level. This is because, number one, a lot of the fun in rhythm games is centered around your personal improvement and performance. And number two, your skill is comparable and quantifiable. According to the game, one score or rating can be objectively better than another. These two things make it very easy to attach your ego to your scores. No longer is it about you being better at the game than other people, it's about you being better than other people, period. This phenomena is what I'd like to call rating superiority. Generally, a high-ranking player who has their ego attached to their scores may feel like they're more objectively deserving of certain things than someone of a lower rank. Now, this phenomenon is especially prevalent in the game of My, where your skill level is represented by a single number, and that number is constantly visible to other players. Before I dive a little deeper, as usual, I asked my Discord server what they thought about it and if they have any experiences they'd like to share. So if you want to be a part of this, make sure to join my Discord server. Link in description and comments. So this video is divided into 3 parts. First, I'm going to give my own opinion on the subject and why I think it occurs. Second, I'm going to give some suggestions on how to avoid this rating superiority complex. And number 3, I'm going to go through the Discord submissions. So in My, how does rating superiority usually manifest? So once again, My is quite a unique rhythm game in the fact that 1, it's like in an arcade and you are essentially forced to interact with other people if you want to play the game. It's not a game like Osu where you can technically enjoy the game without ever interacting with someone. In My, everyone has to be there in person, and because of that, this phenomena is especially prevalent. For those of you who don't know, rating in My is calculated by your best 50 scores, 30 of which are old songs, 20 of which are new, not super important. The point is that this is how My the game defines skill. And the way the cab is designed, there is a top screen where it displays your name, your profile picture, your rating, your done course, and your nameplate. So your rating is always visible to anyone who's watching behind you, unless you hide it, of course. So someone with rating superiority might look at lower level players and think, stupid casuals taking up the queue again. Or they might even refuse to acknowledge or talk to other people who are far below their skill level. They might even do things like skip the queue of lower rated players, taking advantage of the fact that newer players are not as used to the etiquette around My. And in the inverse, if you are a lower rated player and your ego is attached to your rating, you might feel like you don't even deserve to be there at the My cab, especially if it's full of people higher rating than you. You might feel like you don't even deserve to be taking up the cab when higher rated players could be playing. You might also feel extremely intimidated by people who are higher rated than you and probably avoid talking to them. It is in this sense that rating, whether we like it or not, essentially determines your social status. Where the higher rating you are, the more opportunities seem to arise in terms of socializing, having queue priority, and so on. One very important point is that everyone experiences and judges rating very differently. This is because people usually judge rating based on their own experience of climbing the rating ladder. And people who improved really quickly may judge a lower rated player very differently to someone who took many years to get to a higher level. Now that we've described what this phenomenon is, I think the next logical question is, why does this even happen in the first place? Why are we so judgmental about a stupid number that inaccurately represents someone's skill? So remember how I said rating essentially determines your social status? Well, if that is true, then theories of social psychology apply here, and we can use existing research and frameworks from social psychology. Alright, bear with me. I gotta use my knowledge as a psychology major somehow, okay? In social psychology, there's a common theory called social comparison theory. And this theory was developed by Leon Festinger in 1954. What the theory essentially says is that humans have an innate drive to... What the theory essentially says is that humans have an innate drive to compare themselves to other people in order to form opinions about their own abilities. So this theory is most commonly used in appearance comparisons. For example, I'm more ugly than this guy, but I'm more good looking than this guy. But obviously we're talking about My here. And I think this theory maps on almost perfectly. And I'll explain why in a bit. So in the theory, there are 2 types of comparisons that someone can make towards someone else. The first type of comparison is an upwards comparison. Now this comparison is made towards someone who you've deemed as having higher social status. So the reason people do this is because people innately want to move themselves up the social ladder. And by comparing upwards, you allow yourself to see the similarities and differences between yourself and the person who has a higher social status than you. The second type of comparison that people make is a downwards comparison. This is a comparison between yourself and someone who you've deemed having lower social status than you. So it's just the opposite of an upwards comparison. So how does this apply to Mai? In Mai and also many other rhythm games, your social standing is literally quantified into 1 or maybe 2 numbers. I would argue that this amplifies the effect of social comparison by tenfold. Because this theory is normally applied with appearance comparisons, and appearance is generally quite subjective. But in the field of rhythm games, there is no subjectivity to your score. At least the game doesn't treat it like that. It's just one number, 10,623. Boom. Because it's literally quantified, someone who has a rating of 10,001 will technically be better than someone who has a rating of 10,000. This makes upwards and downwards comparison almost trivial. You look at the number the person has, you look at your own number, is it bigger or is it smaller? And I think it just accelerates this process so much. And I think this is why phenomenon like grading superiority exists so prevalently. Just to make it very clear, let's say you're like a 15k player, like exactly 15,000 rated. You walk into an arcade, you see like 3 people in front of you that are 14k. You will make a downwards comparison because you can see your rating is literally a higher number than their number. And as I said before, you end up separating yourself from the people who you've deemed below you. So you create this divide between yourself and the people lower rated than you because of your tendency to want to climb the social ladder and be part of the elite people. And let's say you see someone who's 16.4k rated. Then you will make an upwards comparison. You will identify the similarities in your own play and theirs, identify the differences, and how you might be able to change your own play to improve. And most importantly, you are giving them social power by making an upwards comparison. Alright, now that we've established how it manifests in Mai, let's go through some things that might help you avoid having rating superiority complex. Before I start, according to Festinger, social comparison is innate to humans. Although he proposed the theory a really long time ago, most researchers still agree on the fact that social comparison is pretty innate to humans. So if you've exhibited tendencies to do the things I've formally described, don't feel so bad because that's just part of being human. That being said, here are some tips to try and avoid playing into this complex too hard. Number 1 is understanding why it actually happens. Now, I've literally just explained why it happens according to psychological literature, so we've got that covered if you've watched this far. Number 2 is reminding yourselves that rating and scores aren't objective measures of skill. Of course, they are generally pretty accurate, but as I've mentioned in previous videos, it doesn't tell the full story of your play. For example, a triple S could mean you AP'd 90% of the chart, choke the ending, and that's it. Or it could also mean you hit every pattern with bad accuracy. There's just so much that goes into a play that can't be represented with a single score. But I don't think this is inherently wrong of the game to do this. Of course, the game has to quantify your performance somehow. But just to remind yourself that these numbers don't represent you and don't represent even what it tries to represent, which is your skill. There is so much more to your skill than just that number. And in my mind, there's so much more to your skill than just 50 scores out of like thousands of songs in the game. A third thing you can do is try and remove your ego from your rating. I've mentioned this in previous videos, but ego is generally the cause of all of these social issues. And if you are able to remove your ego from your scores, all of this wouldn't be a problem. But it's a lot easier said than done, right? I think doing things like reminding yourself, it's just a game, and also trying to beat your own scores rather than others would help removing your ego. However, I think the solution is so much more complicated and could be a video on its own. So I'll just move on. And the fourth and final point, I think, is to just treat everyone like a human being. Everyone is here to enjoy the game. And even if you inevitably make social comparisons, let it happen, but at least keep it internal. But on the outside, treat everyone equally and as humans. Anyway, I know it's not that easy and it's much more complicated than the 4 things I just listed, but ultimately, as long as you are trying, that is mostly good enough. Alright, that's all I have to say. Let's go to the Discord submissions.
How many planes are there, bro?
Alright, we got a lot of submissions. So if I skip yours, please don't be mad. It's just cause there's a lot and this video can't be 1 hour. Oh my god. The first submission, and it's Ace Aquarius saying, there's literally a saying in China that says, once you reach 16k, you can get laid. And we got 44 skull emojis on that. And then Venti immediately responds with rating don't matter. And then Ace Aquarius is like, not true. I'm already 16,577 and nothing had happened. This is so sad, guys. Tsubaki Tenma says, higher rating players are usually just naturally more egotistical in my opinion, even though it is indeed rare to find nice high rating players. A lot of 15 and 16Ks refuse to play levels below 14 and 13 plus, and will pick certain songs to mess with lower ratings such as Utage's. I think people have just normalized it in the Mima community and it's not good. Actually, that's a super interesting point, is the issue of picking songs. I think this is not so much to do with ego and much to do with when people who are very different in skill level play together, they have to play very different songs to improve. Someone at like 11k are not going to be improving much if they just play 14s, but someone at like 15 or 16k wouldn't be improving much if they just play 11s and 12s. I don't think that's disrespect on either part. I think there's just an inherent issue of playing together with someone not in your skill level. That being said, it is my opinion that you shouldn't complain what someone else is picking when it's their pick. You get 2 songs, they get 2 songs. So if you're 15k, you can pick your 14s and 15s. If you're 12k thing, you can pick your 12s and 11s and 13s. And neither party should complain because it's their right to their pick. Josh says, classic high rating players solo queuing when arcade is busy. Yeah, I mentioned this already, but higher rating players skipping queues is very common because a lot of them wrongly think they're above the queuing rules because they're more important and they deserve to play more because they're grinding a chart or something. Dave says being a high rated player basically means that you have aura in front of other people. But sometimes some higher rated players are cocky and some are not. As a person who's considered as a high rating player, people are afraid to talk to me because I seem like a cold person, but I'm totally not. I think the issue of rating superiority goes both ways. It's not just the lower rating players that suffer, but it's also the high rating players who are just chilling, but they have a bad reputation because of the other egotistical high rated players. This is why I think rating is like low-key a social construct that is propagated by people who are actually egotistical. It just leads to generalization based on your rating, which is just obviously not a good thing. Freaky My DX Surone version says, when I was 8k to 12k I had no confidence at all, but now that I'm low 15k I'm able to somewhat communicate, so I guess rating correlates to your social skills. No, it doesn't. I think that is very interesting, but it's not the fact that it correlates with your social skills. It correlates with your social standing. And the higher rating you have, the more social power that you wield. And I know this person has improved quickly, so they know what it's like to be lower rated and then higher rated, and they can feel how much easier it is to talk to people when you're higher rated. Volk says, there's this guy at my local time zone, 15.5k, that tries to avoid playing with lower ranks. He would either let them play solo or let us play with them instead, even though it's supposed to be his turn. Also, this guy really hates playing anything below a 14. I remember when I picked a 13 plus, and he immediately track skips the song and just went back to sit and play Balatro instead. Lastly, he also have tried hogging the cab for himself. This is when my time zone only have one pair of my cab. By barricading the cab with those wet floor signs, IDK will prompted him to do this, I can't lie. That's kind of crazy. I mean, I think it's just an outlier there, but like, what the hell? Frieza Pikachu says, lower rating players here sometimes hesitate if they're picking Nico Voka because of the saying that Nico Vokas is sleepers. I don't know what you guys are talking about, bro. That's literally the best folder in the game. That's the folder that got me into my mind in the first place. If you ever play with me, freaking pick Nikavoka all day, bro. Poisoned says, I think I really felt personally affected by this, but it's a common instance at the arcades where I feel like I'm forced to allow space or give those who have a higher rating than me to play, just so I could avoid confrontations or that feeling that I shouldn't be there. A personal experience here, but I'm currently 12k, and there was once a bunch of 15k players just ignored my presence and basically hogged the cabs for a good 5 to 6 games. I felt like I didn't deserve to be there at that point and eventually sought up to find quieter locations. That's messed up. But that's what I mean. I mentioned before that lower rated players might not feel like they deserve to be there, which is so stupid. But no, everyone has the right to play My. You queue properly and be respectful. Like Arson says, sorry, can you guys stop commenting on this post? I am 16.4k, my bad bro. Ahmed Chan says, I remember one time someone with like 14k rating told me to stop playing My and just became toxic at the time when I didn't have an IMA card yet. Really affected my confidence, which led me to stop playing My for a month before finally regaining the confidence. See, this is what I mean. There's like literal detrimental effects to the game as a whole if you don't respect lower rated players. Because look at this person stop playing My for 1 month. If we kind of remove the barrier between higher and lower rated players, it becomes much more welcoming for new players, right? Because people don't feel scared to be low rated. Viella says, there was this guy who was being very aggressive in the community about how he's better than 60% of My plays. He's 12k and he crashed out when he gets bad scores very often. One time he said he's going to blow up the branch because his scores didn't save. What the Okay, well, I don't think that's to do with the game. They might be super insecure or something. I'm not sure, but that's kind of crazy. Freaky My DX Mount Druid version says, when I was in Korea last year, before I had an IME, I saw a My machine in a more touristy area with a singular player on it. I asked the guy after he finished playing his set if I could play with him all by myself in Korean, which he didn't understand because I think he was Japanese. But I got told that I wasn't allowed to play since I didn't have an IME or gloves in broken English. I explained to him that I didn't need either of those to play and that I was next in the queue. So therefore I should play the next set, no matter what. But he kept on insisting that it was illegal for me to play. I ended up walking away because I couldn't be asked to argue any longer. And when I came back to check the cab an hour later, I saw it was completely full with people, with the guy telling me I wasn't allowed to play waiting behind him. Damn. Of course you're allowed to play without gloves and IME. I think maybe the person was worried that the cab would be damaged if you don't play with gloves or something like that, which that I understand. But again, like, it's very possible that they just feel socially superior to someone who he doesn't have an IME, bro. Like, get out of here. He probably feels like that. Melody de Sylvion says, I'm scared to play with high 15Ks or 16K because they probably don't want to play my easy skibbity Mars 13s. They also probably pick hard 14/plus and I die or need to revert to the experts. I'm also pretty sucks at 14s in general, so they tire me out too much. You know what? That's a good point. I still stand by the fact that when it's your pick, you should be able to pick anything you want. But it's a good point that sometimes you pick a chart that doesn't have difficulties available for the other person that is within their skill level. For example, you pick like a 14 plus and the expert is like an 11 or something. Well, I don't think that exists. The other person who could be like a 14k either has a pick between an 11 or a 14 plus, and then there's just like no good in between. So they're forced to pick a chart that is really out of their skill range. To that, I understand. If you want to be really nice, I think, yeah, check with the other person, is this chart okay? It's a good point. Freaky My DX International version, the OG. These responses are actually so interesting because here in Korea, nobody really cares about others' ratings or song choices, just their own. In fact, I've never been turned down when asked to sync play. Consequently, lower rated players are less shy and higher rated players are indifferent and or friendly. Okay, that's good to hear, except it seems like the other Freaky My kind of had a different experience with Korea. So Everest Peak says, in Australia, I had an interaction with a 16k and he would just keep queue skipping me when I was a low 6k because they wanted to play their perfect challenge Kamui, and I was kind of pissed at them for hogging the cab. I didn't know what to do because they were 16k and I didn't really want to start beef with people, so I left them and hoped I never encountered them again. Yeah, the freaking perfect challenge spam. That's the thing, like, I get it. When you're high rated, you want to get as many tries as possible, but other people have as much right to the cab as you do. Multi says, can a Sumlong name meet and greet happen? I'm willing to travel from America. Okay. Freaky My DX Indonesian version says, it's kind of interesting for me because relatively I reached 16k pretty quickly. So I basically felt both the experience of being a new player and being 16k plus pretty close together. So I can definitely tell it feels so different. Exactly. When I started out like a low rated player, it definitely felt intimidating to play the game with people better than me. I had to reach out to my cab partner for some sort of social interaction. Also, it felt like there was less trust towards me as a player. I remember that when I was 12k, I was apparently hitting too hard, but no one told me directly and instead complained about it on Discord, which gutted me at the time. Nowadays though, I feel an almost opposite effect of people being intimidated by me even though I want to socialize with them. It's very stark and it personally fuels one of my main philosophies when playing the game: to be a good influence towards my local community. This person has the right idea. There's two things I like to say about this. One is that because she improved so quickly, she experienced both low and high rated experiences very close together, and yeah, the difference is very stark. The second thing I'd like to say is it feels like a lose-lose, right? If you're low rated, no one wants to talk to you because you suck or whatever, and when you're high rated, nobody wants to talk to you either because you're too intimidating, you're too scary for them. So it's like we have to break down this barrier, right, in order to have a healthy community. Blueberry says, going on with this, there's a saying in Korea: before the queue everyone's equal, and it encourages low rating players who are too scared to queue up and play. I think it's really about setting an inclusive culture that pushes back rating superiority. Yeah, if that's a thing in Korea, that's great. And we need that in more countries, I feel. Na says, whole reason I got into My was because a group of 14Ks to 16Ks saw me watching and just asked if I wanted to play. At the time, I said I didn't know how to and they just taught me. No egos, just taught me how to play. They even helped me get an IME card. Now I meet up with some of them every month to play My. You have no idea how shocked I was when I heard about rating superiority and y'all's experience with it. What the hell? That's crazy. We need more of that, bro. YYY says, there's no such thing as rating superiority. People who base their entire personality on My rating are socially inept, while intimidation, on the other hand, is quite prevalent in different communities, My included, and it honestly comes down to confidence and how you perceive the game itself. For instance, I tend to notice how normies don't care at all, whereas players that are way too attached to the game might probably feel the intimidation. I think I agree with this person generally, except for the part where they're like, the rating superiority doesn't exist. Like, I think it's a very real thing. And I feel like everyone has experienced it to some degree. As Rieli says, in my civilization, nobody ever chooses to pick the expert difficulty. My dream one day is to ascend to my champion and defeat the Skibidi Rizzler Mogger TRG. Wow. Hint says, rating matters so much because it's probably the easiest way to see a person's skill set. You just have to see a 5-digit number and that's it. In terms of the skill regarding the ability to recognize and hitting most of the notes, rating does matter. But when you go deeper down through skills, like getting AP or high deluxe scores like 5 stars, or even AP+, rating does not matter at all. But people just don't know about that when they're just not that skilled yet. So what they could only see is the rating. Rating is just it's too easy, right? It's too easy to see it. Therefore, we make comparisons so easily because the numbers is just right there. ZS Streak says, I've seen someone at my hometown's arcade spamming the reject button on the friend request like it's Ada Beta Jack just because the other guy's 11k, but when he's with other people with higher rating, he accepted it instantly. It was very surprising, his behavior, because of how disrespectful it was, especially in front of a long queue. I do in fact think rating is seen as too much of a status rather than an achievement, to the point that they would deliberately look down on low rating people. Lower rating people tend to be very shy and awkward if it's their first time, or rarely play without talking with other people. Here's the thing, right? Like, I don't think lower rating people are shy inherently. They're just shy because of the social standing they have within My. Alright, that's it. That's all the submissions. Oh my gosh, I've been recording so long that the sun is setting. Yo guys, some long name from the future here. We hit 1,000 subs recently, so I'd like to thank everyone so much for all the support that I've gotten. I didn't expect to hit this milestone so quickly, so I'm pleasantly surprised. Shout out to Hamco, Minori, Freaky My DX Filipino version, U Deans, Art PhD, Holbark, Donto, Freaky My DX International version, Scoogy, Rick, Tay, Suskus, Freaky My DX Malaysian version, Noel, Deshmot, MB Masher, and Tenshi for boosting the Sumlong server. Alright, if you have your own stories or opinions you'd like to share, feel free to leave it in the comments. That's it from me. See ya.